I was in denial for quite a time, before it became so extreme, the muscle, the immobility, that I had to accept that I needed a wheelchair. This diagnosis of neuroplasticity, which I've got, PLS, which is a form of motor neurone. I mean, you can develop it like poor old Rob Burrow when you're about late 30s. He was a rugby player, very energetic, quite a solid looking guy. And when I watched him on television, I mean, he's still very compos mentis, but he certainly looks quite wasted in physical terms. And I'm certainly not losing weight. So at the moment, I'm still feeling quite solid. But I've got really this foot that it's as if your muscles, they might be atrophying in some ways and weakening, but they do seem to have minds of their own. And you've kind of, when I get out of the car, for instance, the right foot, and I've got it on the right side and in the lower body more than anywhere else. The right foot wants to stick on the ground, won't move until I really concentrate and tell it to. And I'm living in fear of falling all the time, which, so there's a psychological aspect to it, a neurological aspect to it, and probably lots of other aspects to it, but they don't really know the causes. There's a few percent of people who have a genetic version, and they're hoping a wonder drug will treat them soon. And I've offered to go on any trials they want me to go on to help with research, but also I'm sort of hoping that by my mid-70s they'll have made a breakthrough, but who knows? That would give me 2.5 years or something. Because I'm trying, as well as moaning and groaning and denouncing the universe for my condition, I do try and look at it dispassionately sometimes, as if I'm a case study, and then look at possible solutions. I've asked to go on every trial that there is out there. And I mean, there are sometimes electrical suits you can try out, or balance belts, or various technological solutions. And then there are the force of will psychological ones, which would, I suppose they would be based on relaxation, which I'm not very good at, having a positive mindset, which I can do, although politics around the globe seems to be in a carnival of reaction now. But I would like to be able to give people positive messages about a state like this, because I was running, walking, totally independent, going to demonstrations, as you know. I could still sit on a picket line with a placard in a wheelchair. Yeah. But, those days are gone, and I'm only 72. But I would like to see how the world could be made a better place through my condition, as well as political action.
But why are those days gone? Because you can sit in a wheelchair. Last demonstrations I went to, there were people in wheelchairs.
Yes, this is true. If I get my electric wheelchair, if I don't knock people over right, left and centre, I'll try and make some demonstrations.
Women arrested for knocking over police.
Yes. Well, my brother had a wonderful story. He was very disabled by cancer, one of my brothers, and he had a wonderful story of going to B&Q and he was a driver as well, and he was still able to drive. He had a permanently bent leg and walked like Groucho Marx. But he went to this DIY place and was offered a buggy. And the first thing he did after a little training session was knock over the person who'd given it to him, then knock over a tower of paint tins, and then He made a sharp exit in the car, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
And my mother-in-law, who also was a driver, she had a wheelchair after a stroke, and she would shoot through the checkouts without paying. I think that was just my mother-in-law, actually. I thought motor neurone, apart from exceptions like Stephen Hawking, was pretty much a death sentence. And I know that my son-in-law's mum, who was also very active, developed it in her early 70s. And she had the ALS version, which is full-blown motor neurone, which meant that she very quickly had no voice, had no mobility. And I did see her in a nursing home just before she died. And she was writing things rather than having done a voice box. But Mary was wonderfully strong, but she died back in 2010. So I didn't realise there were other versions on the spectrum of motor neurone. So when I was told I had a slower version, rarer version, called primary lateral sclerosis, I started to look it up, because I'm not a medical doctor, but I like research, and I looked up PLS and discovered I could live 20 years with it, but it might have some unfortunate effects. And I really don't know if it will speed up, if I'm on a plateau. If it develops into ALS, it would certainly speed up. But that doesn't necessarily happen. So I think people should be aware there are a lot of neurological problems on the spectrum of Parkinson's and motor neurone that still mean you can have quite a full life, and you don't necessarily die within a couple of years. I mean, I just would be interested in how they're trying to forge new neural pathways in Cuba, because the conventional medical consultants are now a little less cynical and sceptical about neuroplasticity, which is trying to form new neural pathways for people like me with severe spasticity suddenly kicking in after some years of falling over and not knowing why, you know. So that all of that would be interesting. The idea that you can forge new neural pathways because you've damaged the existing ones. So I don't think anyone feels there's a lot of hope for those because they're sort of destroyed. But forging new ones would mean trying to get your brain and your body back in sync, and that might have a psychological element or a meditation element to it. And I could, if I wasn't such a wuss at the moment, because I was only confirmed with this in early October, I'd be trying all these things, but give me time and I'll come round to them. It's a bit like the mobility aids. I'm sort of scared by electric wheelchairs, and I'm scared by suits that they reckon you can try on, and then suddenly your neural pathways are replaced by the suit.
Wow,
and you're walking.
That's so cool. You could be walking down through
Yes,
the village in is it like a space suit or something?
Yes, well, no, actually not as not like the Michelin Man anyway, which other people have suggested for my falling probably. But I would be quite interested in that. I'd love to just know of a medication that I could take, to be honest with you, because that would be so simple. And suddenly I'll start moving my legs again, because I was running and walking and completely independent even a few years ago, because although I was beginning to find I was moonwalking a bit, and I would unexpectedly fall off the pavement into the road without a gin and tonic, honest. I would suddenly do that or fall any which way. And those falls started to increase. And it took me several years before a real deterioration in the muscles began. It didn't really begin until last summer, I would say. And then suddenly I couldn't even with help walk around. And I was furniture hopping in the house, and then unable even to walk in the house without tripping and falling. So, I mean, that's when they decided I had a neurological disorder. But sometimes, to be fair to them, they have to wait until it gets so bad. They can see by then testing you. I mean, I didn't realise this, but the brisker your reflexes, the more likely you are to have a neural pathway problem.
Oh, wow.
And I always thought, oh, that was a sign of good health. But no, they were intrigued by my reflexes, which were, as I say, quite brisk and strong, and evidently that was a sign that things were not well. We're just both scared, winding each other up. It's very hard for a carer. I realise that. John does now everything for me, and I get exasperated saying, it's over there, if I could show you, you know. So I have to try and be patient with John. I don't think either of us is very good at patience or understanding or not being judgmental. We've got to find a different modus vivendi, really, because a way of living that doesn't mean that we're always bickering or shouting at each other. But it's quite difficult because I'm frustrated, or maybe I'm really grieving for the person I was. He is too, because I was just such a lively person, going off to conferences and going off on aeroplanes. Although I must say, if you look into ways of helping you with this, any paralysed condition really, airport assistance is brilliant in our experience. So you can go abroad, you can do things. And I've relied very much on the advice of a friend with MS, who's only in her later 40s now, but who's managed and has pulled her life back. So I listen to her and people around her, her care team, and think, you know, I can carry on doing a lot of the stuff I enjoyed. I presented at a conference over a year ago, and now they want me to write a chapter for their volume, and I will do that. And recently, as you know, Susie, I'm a classicist. Recently there was something about Janus and Ovid, and I thought, well, I've worked on Ovid, I've published on Ovid, I can do this, you know, give us a job. And I was thinking after a glass of wine I could write an abstract for that conference, and then my younger daughter and I are both planning an abstract for this conference. I am planning, if I'm still able, to go to a face-to-face conference in Barcelona, because I've got another daughter working out in Spain nearby. This conference, I've been invited to present on my work on manufactured women and artificial intelligence, because I did Ovid's Pygmalion ivory statue and went through various versions, the cultural trajectory of this story, right up to modern screen versions on television and film. And that was part of my monograph. And then I did another little chapter, pretentiously called Statues, Synths and Simulacra. Because I thought, well, you know, as I say, I have a glass of wine, I come up with these brilliant ideas, and then I think, bloody hell, I've got to present a paper on that, or got to write a chapter on that. So I'm still trying to keep my mind alive. And this conference in July is actually for engineers. It's on smart materials. And I've sort of said to them, you do realise I'm a classicist and a disabled classicist now. And I'm hoping they'll come back and make accommodation for me. Even under this awful Tory government, they haven't yet destroyed the National Health Service. And if you ask and you're diagnosed with something chronic, the social services, the support services, from occupational therapy to people who coordinate the MND sufferers, they're absolutely brilliant. Nothing is too much trouble. And they order you things for free. I mean, sometimes they're means tested, but the thing is to just make sure what you're entitled to. You've paid your taxes all your life for the NHS. So on principle, you should use whatever it has to offer and really welcome the people into your house, because they are lovely, sensitive people who really gone into that line of work because they care about other people. And I think that's so wonderful. That's a wonderful experience to have. Doesn't mean you aren't going to be in a wheelchair with your placard on the picket lines to have them paid properly. But it does mean you welcome them in.
Would you consider joining on the picket lines with your placard?
Yes, if my husband, John and I are still very much on the left, and he would take me and join in on any picket line that we could get to. And I would have to get to it in a wheelchair and stagger out the car. But, if they wanted me there, and it would be wonderful to have that experience, to feel I was still doing something. Because if nothing else, I need socialism, not barbarism, across the world now. One of the counsellors said to me, the trouble is when people get a chronic illness diagnosis, they get busy dying instead of getting busy living. And I'm still able to do things. So I should really celebrate that and encourage everybody else who finds themselves in this really unpleasant, very difficult situation. Just remember there are still things you can do. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, I mean quite often, quite honestly. I sleep okay, but I have vivid dreams, always have. And in them I can walk and run, and I wake up in the morning and sort of try and shuffle myself up the bed, which I can't do very easily now, and think it's not fair, it's not fair, why me? But you've got to, life is as it is really, and you've just got to live with it.